This episode of Ticket Volume is brought to you by us, InvGate. Get service operations under control in no time. Get 1 free month of our software solution by going to try.invigate.com. Ticket Volume is excited to bring you a former classroom educator turned Director of Educational Technology and Innovation who's been pushed into doing IT management, staffing for services, and innovating educational technology. Welcome to Ticket Volume, news and information for improving IT experiences. I'm your host, Matt Barron. As you know, each week I bring on different leaders from across the globe and across industries to talk about IT service management. And speaking of IT service management, this podcast is brought to you by InvGate, a global leader in IT service and asset management software. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, or actually, new year, new idea, don't subscribe, don't like, don't comment. Take the time that you need for yourself. And if you feel compelled, then you can do those things if that feels organically natural to you. So let's begin. Welcome to Ticket Volume, Casey Rutherford.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on.
From the comfort of my own living room, considering the crazy snow we got here over the last 2 days. And so not having to be in the office, unlike normal for me.
It's a good thing. Kind of an interesting thing about your industry that it can actually just be canceled in a moment's notice with a foot or so of snow dropping from the sky.
Yeah, when kids can't get on buses and we can't get them safely to school, then we kind of just do things differently. And it gives another day where the rest of us who kind of have that checklist to do can kind of, get through it.
Yes, exactly. I can imagine our audience members being extremely jealous. Imagine no one shows up for a day of work and you can actually go through your ticket log and get some stuff.
Right. Now, the flip side is I have to be in the office most of the time because we're dealing with people who are physically present, right? And so
yes.
I would say 80 to 90% of my time I spend in the office. So everything's got a positive and a negative, right?
Yes. And speaking of positive and negative, I actually kind of screwed up your intro and I said you were pushed into doing IT management. That's such a cruel way of putting it, though.
Yeah, so I guess we can talk a little bit about the role.
Yeah.
So my title is Director of Educational Technology and Innovation. And it's a mouthful. The thing with it is it's about 50% IT management, and then 50% I work with the teaching and learning department, and we work on using technology for learning, working with teachers, doing long-term planning, all of those kinds of pieces. So I wear 2 different hats. I like to say that the innovation part means that I can kind of do what I want with some of my time. I can see a problem and just go and try to fix it. It doesn't have to necessarily be within my lane. That's great for me. It works really well with my personality. But it also means that I take some things on that maybe are too much or too far out of my lane and then have to bring in a lot more people. And it does make things interesting, though. So it's been good for me.
Yes. And what's so unique in your position is that you have that experience as an educator, as a teacher I think you probably taught for over a decade, right?
Correct. Yeah. I was 16 years teaching math and physics. And
and all that experience and what you know about the classroom environment just makes you that much more qualified to be in this role. Whereas someone who comes from an enterprise IT position, they're not going to have that same context, that same empathy towards the teachers and their chaotic lives.
Yeah, that's been a really good experience. My technology team, the technicians, have actually been very open to the notion that I can serve as a really good bridge between them and teachers. And that's been really, really helpful because there are times when I have to go to teachers and be like, hey, I know this is really annoying. When I was a teacher, I found it annoying as well. Here's why we have to do 2-factor authentication or whatever it is, right? Here's why this thing has to happen. And come at it from a perspective of I've been there, I understand, but also this. And on the flip side, I can go to the technicians and be like, yeah, this is really just undue burden on teachers. We really need to make their lives simple. We exist because they're here. And so we need to make sure that we're just servicing them as best we possibly can.
Undue burden. What a great way of putting that, what I think about when I think about you stepping into this role from a teacher is that you have all the user research is like in your brain all the time. And so, yeah, like if you're asking for more cognitive load of your customers, the teachers that provide educational services every day, then you're going to know inherently when you're designing services and when those services are going live. And you have that perspective when you're doing org change, like after something rolls out, you know what generally what their perspective is going to be
Right.
when you make announcements, when you say, hey, please, can you change your processes? Hey, can you please change your habits, and how much you're asking of them in those moments.
Yeah, and the big problem with any kind of organizational change or any kind of change is anticipating problems, right? Like, and particularly anticipating problems outside of your own experience. And so it takes both like, hey, I've now got that lens as a teacher as well, but also like realizing, hey, we need to make sure that we include some of the stakeholders that are outside of that lens so that we're considering all these different parts. Special education is a good example. I have no experience within special education. And so going to my special ed director or going to some of the teachers, a DCD classroom where students are significantly developmentally disabled is a whole different ballgame. And so, using those different people and stakeholders as well as my own experience has been really helpful as well.
Yes, think about that diversity of education. You've got, 2 or 3 different languages being spoken at the school. You've got phys ed, you've got engineering and high tech stuff that's going on. You really need to be able to provide for all those different industries. I mean, that's the way that I think about it as industries, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's really interesting. Everybody's got their own need, right? And so one size fits all works to some extent. And to other extent, I mean, this is why we have an app catalog in the hundreds, because a lot of different people wanting to be able to do a lot of different things.
Yes. My wife happens to be a teacher, and when she needs something of her IT department, it's usually a custom app. It's like something completely unique. Hey, we need Audacity today so that our students can record their voices and export a wave and send that to me. And that adaptation of what the teacher wants to do and what the technology can do is like, that is the sticking point. That's the rock in the hard place, right?
And what we're allowed to do, right?
Yes.
So the other side of education, especially recently, there have been some new laws put into place that really are designed to protect student privacy, and to some extent do that well. And they also hinder a little bit of what we would like to be able to do. And so there's a lot of balance of looking at, okay, this sounds great. I would love to be able to help you with this. If we go about it this way, then we're going to run into this problem. So maybe we'll think about it this way instead. And a lot of discussion had about the best way to do things.
Okay, so let's move away from projects. Let's talk about your IT side, the service desk that you're basically starting up and running. How is it going? How is it going building the service desk?
Yeah, so we implemented a new system for that this year. And the reason is we were paired with facilities. So somebody wants their, sink unclogged. They have a system for that, right? The problem is it's just a text box. That's it. There's no customization. There's a little bit of automation that's involved based on what categories people can, choose, but very little customization available. It didn't integrate with any of our asset management stuff. So we had multiple systems. We had that system. We had our student information system in a general sense. We have a hodgepodge of spreadsheets tracking various things, right? And then we had an asset management system. And so we took on a large project this summer of pulling all those together into one system. So we implemented a system called Incident IQ. It's custom, well, it's not custom, it's designed for schools. We looked at, some of the big names out there in help desk systems in a general sense and landed on this because of the specific school nature. It integrates directly with our student information system. So it pulls in, for example, a teacher's classes. So now a teacher can go in and they can say, hey, Johnny's having a problem with his iPad. She clicks on Johnny, it pulls up his iPad, then she can submit a ticket and we can then go in and remotely check out that iPad, within seconds, as opposed to the old system of, okay, like which student are you talking about? What's his ID number? Because it turns out we have a few Johnnies around, so just really streamlined a lot to pull all those things together. But on top of that, customization abilities of,
Okay.
We had things like a form if you want to request a particular app, right? And that was a Google form that then I got notified, and then I'd submit a help desk ticket in order to get a different technician to. And so we've automated those processes where we built a custom form within Incident IQ. So they fill it out, I get flagged right away, I approve it, automatically it transfers to the technician who installs the app. Just streamlining a lot of processes like that.
That is awesome. And that's all been done in the last 2 years?
Oh, in the last 6 months, really.
Last 6 months. Impressive. Yep. That's really cool. I love the description that you gave about how the teachers are kind of like this middleman between the students and you in some cases.
Yes, a lot, especially at the elementary level, right? Secondary kids tend to come to us themselves. Or a teacher says, hey, go down and talk to the technician down in the media center. But at the elementary level, it's the teachers are saying, usually they say, actually, I have a problem with an iPad, because they can still consider them their classroom iPads, which is fairly legit. But yeah, they are acting as the mediator there.
I love that. And when we spoke earlier, I think you mentioned something. You're actually taking this to the next level with automation. Like you're actually doing onboarding, and like new staff gets put in through these systems. What else are you building in there?
Yeah, so that's new as well within the last couple of months. I won't tell the story about how we kind of got one of these cases where we bought two different platforms that turned out were under the same umbrella, and they started syncing and talking to each other without us really knowing it. And in one of the systems, we were trying to automate it. In the other system, it had been for years manually entered by HR. And so then as they started talking to each other, it was creating duplicate accounts because there wasn't a unique identifier. So all of a sudden we're like, how do we, we've been wanting to automate account creation anyway. So we kind of took that as, hey, let's fix this now. Well, we've got this problem where we could kind of blame it on this third party, but do what we want to do, which is let's clean this all up. So now we have one core system, our SIS, which is Infinite Campus. It's kind of the standard for a lot of schools. And we input some basic information in there, and that triggers an IDM system called Clever that is, again, school specific, that will create an account for the person. It syncs to AD, which syncs to Google, which syncs to everything else. Mm-hmm. And so we just enter a name, a username, and an ID number, and everything goes from there. And that's new within the last 2 or 3 months. And so really this year, the project has been, let's automate. Let's get to the point where basically if somebody says, hey, we need this account created, we have it done in usually minutes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about this a little bit, because audience members that are listening to this and work in a school district are going to either reach out to you or ask specifically, how can I actually do this? So how did you get started? Did you actually map out that process and talk to all the stakeholders? Did you do it in a vacuum? How did it go?
That's a great question. We had been had this kind of formulating in back of mind, and particularly my network technician had been thinking we're close already. We already had AD pushing into Google, and then Google syncing with a lot of different apps. We already had Clever in place. We were using Clever to sync, really it's actually classroom sections to a lot of the educational apps that are used.
Okay.
So if a teacher goes into, say, Schoology, it pulls up their roster right away, right? And that happens through Clever. We had a lot of the pieces in place. So when it came time to, hey, let's add the adult accounts to this, let's make that all sync, we kind of started looking in, okay, we already have these things in place. What do these things do? And it turned out Clever had a solution for that was honestly super cheap. And they had it in place. The huge thing was, and this is the number one thing I learned from all of this sync, is you have to have a comparison report. You have to be able to compare yesterday to what is supposed to happen tomorrow. So we had a couple of systems where we didn't have that. And all of a sudden tomorrow happens and you get HR calling and they're like, hey, I just got a call from 15 people saying they have a new account, but they already had an account. What's going on? Well, when we implemented this Clever IDM sync, my technician was able to run a report every time he was going to sync that said, here are all the changes that are going to happen. And we could go, oh, hold on a second, that we need to fix all of these different scenarios. So we could go in and fix them all before actually running the sync. That is, honestly, that was the number one piece that made it go well.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes they call that export transport load. I think that's right. ETL is sometimes what they call that when
Okay.
there's this middle moment where you you can kind of see, hey, this is what you thought you were gonna do. This is how it's gonna turn
Right.
out, and you get like that moment to thank God we get to fix this before 30,000 records get deleted or updated or
100%.
changed. Yeah.
100%.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, what a unique career you are walking towards. What do you think made you specifically qualified to do this? Like, what do you think? Why are you drawn to this? Is this something that you're actually interested in, like continuing to grow on, and why?
Yeah. I think the thing that makes me interested is that I'm actually, a lot of times I'm a dissenting voice in the field of educational technology. Um, I there are a lot of things that we do that either don't make sense in educational technology, or like we're doing it and it kind of feels good. I'm going to give a specific example. So back I started in this world as a technology integrationist, so helping other teachers use technology. And we had these scenarios where so I know this specific video was put out by, an influencer, pushed out on Twitter. This is this great video of how you can get kids to explain Newton's three laws. And it was this really well done video, well produced. The physics was explicitly wrong. Like the kid actually got the information wrong, right? And so the thing was, I kept seeing all of this technology where, cool, the video looks great, and kids clearly aren't actually learning anything. So what made me interested in the field was that's not okay. Like,
Right.
I want to rectify that. And so what I've been trying to shift us to on that level, and this won't be maybe as interesting to your like IT folks, but the shift in my mind in education is we shouldn't be thinking about technology. We should be starting with learning and what our learning like framework is, and then just using technology authentically within that framework. It should just be a part of what we do, which is then to shift back onto the IT side, which is why I find it's like one of my mantras is it just needs to work. When a teacher walks into a classroom, they need to be able to turn everything on, and it just needs to be on the right screen. It just needs to connect. Everything just needs to work, because they shouldn't have to think about the technology itself. They
Uh-huh.
should be able to think about the learning, and then this technology just seamlessly works its way in. That's kind of the
Exactly.
end goal. So that kind of draws those two worlds together in a sense.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. And where have you been going to like learn about these concepts, like IT management specifically, service desk? Like, where are you going to learn and grow?
Yeah, we've got a community of tech directors in the state of Minnesota where in fact, I'm going to a meeting on Friday. That's, a physical in-person meeting. There, I think there's a virtual option as well, but we get together and then we have listservs. I don't, there are some like Slack channels out there. There's enough kind of old school people that the listservs tend to be the
The
more
best.
used. But somebody will say like, actually, one of the things I went out to people about the IDM sync and I said, hey, we're planning on doing this. What hiccups are we going to run into? What problems should we be anticipating? And people got back to me, and so we have these kind of email conversations about those pieces. I archive all of those. So then we're looking now at communication platforms. And so I was able to search back through my archives and go, oh yeah, there was a conversation about this on the listserv a year and a half ago. Here are 3 platforms I should look at, right? So there's a lot of communication on that level with people in my role, especially because there's not a whole lot of us, right? I mean, one per
Uh-huh.
school, basically. So
Yeah, yeah. The only other community I've ever stumbled across was the subreddit for K-12 sysadmins. I think that's right.
yeah,
Great. And you see all these crazy stories about kids who have found workarounds on their iPads for like, here's how you get to the website that they block and stuff like
yep,
that. It's really interesting to see how that challenge specifically is always fascinating to me, because so often in an enterprise, the employees aren't actually trying to actively hack through your corporate network. So you have a unique opportunity to test your security skills. Well done. Um,
100%.
and you mentioned platforms are part of your goal. What is next, right? Like, you accomplished a bunch of stuff within 6 months. What does this year look like? I'm sure you're probably part of the planning, for your annual. Where are you at?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
what I've found with platforms is that there's this really delicate balance between functionality and one place for everything, right? So a number of years back, there was a particular company that was trying to combine the student information system and learning management system pieces. And we were told that this was going to work great. It was going to, unite everything. And the problem is they did one of those well and one of those not well. And what we learned in that process is that it's actually better to have two different systems where both of them are highly functional than it is to try to merge into one system where you don't get the functionality that you really need. Now, that said, that means that parents have two places to look, right? They have a place for grades and for like general information, and then a place for like the learning aspect of things. And so a lot of what we're doing right now is starting to look at what are some of these systems that we can roll into one, and what are the systems that we need to keep separate so that we keep the high functionality. So right now we're looking at communication platforms. It turns out that we learned in pandemic that one of the huge things is how do we connect with people in a way that's authentic for them. So our audience in that sense is families. And the answer is by and far SMS texting. And so there are a variety of platforms out there at this point that do, kind of a generic, they generate a local DID so that you can kind of send out mass text messages. And you can do it in a lot of ways. Well, these platforms are all very different. Some of them will do that plus like forms and like field trips and things like that. And some of them will do that in like a data warehouse kind of piece so that you can say like, hey, I want to message every student who speaks Spanish and has a grade of D or lower, right? And so it's a question right now that we're having of which of these things do we pair up, and can we get rid of this platform over here because we're pulling in that? And it's a really big, messy question. But it's fun to consider, and hopefully we'll get the best out of it by being really thoughtful.
Okay. And so is that part of your 2023 plan, is to get that sort of communication platform going where texting can actually happen, like a one-to-many situation?
That's a big one right now. We get dinged a lot in our feedback from the community about communication. And so kind of figuring out a more uniform platform there. So that's a big one. The IDM piece was really big. So really what'll be the true test of that is going to be next fall when we're hiring, because, right now we're hiring a person here and there. It's going fairly smoothly. When we've got hiring and really a tough one is transitions, right? So this person isn't leaving or coming, they're actually moving from here to here. And so we're going to have to be keeping a really close eye on that. Then the other big thing in 2023 is what are the new technologies that make sense and what are the ones that are just 95% of educational technology is kind of trash.
Yeah.
To be honest. And so what's the trash and what's the stuff that we should be on the cutting edge with? Do I need to start talking to teachers about NFTs and about, Web 3.0 and at what point is that not relevant to them and we don't need to worry about it? And so starting to really dive into what's kind of innovative, but figuring out what makes sense in education.
Man, another great point for where your industry is so unique in that it's not a written imperative, but there is an assumed intention that you will prepare these students for the future. And so having cutting edge technology in the classroom and getting them closer to those things is going to be not a requirement per se, but you could see how that can be seen as success. And man, those poor teachers in ChatGPT, I don't know how we're going to get past, students not writing their own stuff. I don't even write my own stuff anymore. It's all on ChatGPT now.
Though, here's the thing is that we got through photomath, we got through Wikipedia, we got through like this to me, and I'm actually regurgitating some of what I've read about this.
Of course.
To me, this is just one more case of we just need to adjust and adapt in the same way that we've been doing ever since the first computer landed in the classroom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Photomath is a great example of this. Now, I would argue that we didn't do a great job of adjusting there. We've done a good job of trying to lock things down. But really, the goal is let's understand that. Maybe actually the calculator is a better example. Like back in the 50s or whatever, when the calculator came along, all hell broke loose, right? Well, it turns out that we can just do more now. We take math further because of the calculator. And now we have things like Desmos, which beautifully graph anything that we want to for free online, right? So we just need to look with ChatGPT at how do we use this to be better and go further rather than how do we lock it down and shut it off.
Yeah, precisely. I love that. I didn't know what you were going to say to that, because earlier you're like, okay, I'm kind of skeptical about education technology, but this is sort of the opposite. It's not, you want to adapt, you want to grow, you want to learn, you want people to do all those things too, and look at it skeptically, because not everything's going to work, and we need the time really to adapt and grow.
Well, and in my world, like the attitude I just gave is the skeptic attitude, right? Because the knee-jerk reaction is, hey, let's lock this thing down. Well, I mean, it turns out there are 5 other, apps out there right now that do exactly the same thing that just didn't happen to get the news that ChatGPT did. Probably more than 5, right?
Yeah.
And there will be more. And even if I try to lock it down, a kid can pull out their cell phone and there's nothing I can do about that. Right?
Bingo.
So at some point we have to consider, like, are we going to teach kids, like you said, to live in the 21st century, or are we going to try to, lock everything down until the moment they graduate, and then they got to figure it out on their own? And
wow.
I think the answer is obvious.
Yep. It really is. Oh my gosh. It reminds me of when those calculator watches came out, the Casio calculator watch, and they started to pay attention to what watches kids were wearing in math classrooms. Oh my gosh. Too funny. Yep. Okay.
Wouldn't want the ad on a calculator.
Yeah. What if the calculator was advertising to the...
Gosh, now Siri does all my math for me,
Yeah, well, and it is like with ChatGPT. I think you've got a perfect example. ChatGPT, great tool. It's going to be a great tool. We're going to use it in one way or shape or another. The question is, like, the learning is, don't just take what it gives you verbatim as gospel, as truth. Look at it skeptically, and you're taking what works and you're throwing away what doesn't. Same thing with the calculator. Yep. Not a great graphing tool.
Translators.
What's that?
Right? Google Translate is exactly the same deal, right? So we have 3 different languages, English, Spanish, and Somali, spoken by a high percentage of families in our district. The fact that we can throw everything in Google Translate and then have a translator take a look at it saves everybody time and money, from a business standpoint. And then same deal, like teaching kids to think critically. I mean, it's just as valid to critique something that a translator spit out as it is to try to write it, authentically yourself. I mean, there's obviously a lot of give and play there, but both your and my wife's are Spanish teachers, it turns out. And so we've kind of gone through this process. So it's all just figure out how we can do the best we can with whatever comes along.
Exactly. Here's how you look the best. Here's how you write the best Spanish. Yes, use the Google Translator and go through it yourself. Look at it as a human. Is this accurate? Is this the best way to communicate my ideas? Or do I need something more? Casey, how can people connect with you and learn more?
Yeah. So as you have mentioned, I'm not a LinkedIn person, which apparently is odd. It's just one of those things that I've resisted for whatever reason. So eventually maybe I'll get one started and you can look me up there. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter. I'm Rutherford Casey on Twitter, and I have been prolific there in the past. Otherwise, I work for Faribault Public Schools. I'm pretty Googleable, Casey Rutherford. And so you can email me at crutherford@faribault.k12.mn.us or find me on the web.
I love that. That's the best when you can just say, Google me.
I'm out there. It turns out we're all out there somewhere.
We are. We're all out there somewhere. Well, I want to thank you for being on Ticket Volume, Casey.
Oh, thank you. This has been a pleasure.
And for our audience, thanks for listening to this episode. We've got a bunch more out there from our past episodes. We've got a bunch more coming, and there's a lot of really cool topics that we've got planned for 2023, spreading service management throughout the entire world. So you can submit a specific topic to me if you'd like, or if you've got a guest that you want for us to get on, you want to ask specific questions, you want to come on with this guest, let me know. I'm totally open to suggestions, ideas, feedback, and the algorithm's going to reward us no matter what, as long as you just get involved. So don't forget that this podcast is brought to you by InvGate, an all-in-one IT service management and asset management system that helps organizations with world-class IT support teams. If you're looking for a solution to build your help desk without the headaches of long implementations or costly overhead, you will love InvGate. In fact, IT teams from NASA, Toyota, McDonald's, and more use InvGate to manage requests, automate workflows, and centralize inventory data so that they can focus on delivering better service. Because remember, good service is good business.